You've read the headlines, you've watched the show, but what's really going on behind the scenes? Can you believe what the news tells you, or is there more to the story? Today, I have Savannah Chrisley on the podcast, and she's here to set the record straight and share her and her parents' story. In 2022, her parents, Todd and Julie Chrisley, were sentenced to federal prison for crimes she says were fabricated. Savannah was instantly thrust into the life of motherhood when she took on full custody of her younger siblings while her parents are away. We talk about the events that led up to their charges and conviction, and Savannah explains the mistakes that were made and the injustice that was woven throughout the entire trial. Savannah shares what it's like visiting her mom and dad in prison and how they look at their future. We also get into her love life and what that's like while raising her siblings. Savannah also shares what her new boyfriend did that made her realize he just might be the one. I hope you listen to this episode with an open mind and open heart, and with the understanding that celebrities are real people too and deserve your understanding. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Savannah Chrisley. Well, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Today,
we finally made it work.
Finally, I know. I'm so excited. Today I have Savannah Chrisley here with us, and most of you probably know her. You either saw her growing up on her show, Reality, Chrisley Knows Best, and then she had one with her brother, and then obviously you've been in the news a lot lately,
yes,
for some other reasons. So I'm so glad that you came here to share.
No, thank you.
Today. Okay, so let's just start right out of the box with the bigger news that you've been dealing with, and then we're gonna get to some other things. And I was saying to you this before, so if people don't know, your mom and I are actually friends as well. So I do know you from that angle as well, and I've known your story through your mom's angle as well. In 2022, your parents, Todd and Julie Chrisley, and please correct me if I'm wrong, were convicted of bank fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy offenses. And then your mom was also convicted of wire fraud and obstruction of justice for submitting a falsified document to the grand jury. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So that happened in summer of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And in January, they both went to federal prison.
Yes.
Your mom was sentenced to 7 years.
Yes.
And Todd was sentenced to 12.
12.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you and I were just talking about before we started this was I just felt like it was really important because I have seen so much online, different people's opinions on what happened, their views.
Mm-hmm.
Even like when you post stuff, you're very vocal about it. And I'll read the comments sometimes of things you post, and I just think like people have it so wrong.
Oh, without a doubt.
Do you feel that way?
Without a doubt.
Okay.
And people are entitled to their opinions and beliefs. Like, I was on TV for 10 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm a public figure. I don't have the right to privacy. It's just not what it is.
Do you truly feel that way? You don't have the right?
It's what comes with it. I wish I did,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't get to sit and reap the benefits of being a public figure and then complain about not having privacy.
Which a lot of celebrities do.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. And I just don't roll that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I'm making money off of people tuning into my life or my social media, then I kind of, in a way, I owe them something.
Okay.
Now, there has to be a happy balance between like protecting your own mental health and well-being while also giving to others. But people, when it comes to their comments, I'm like, all right, you're entitled to it. But what I struggle with is when people just refuse to educate themselves and they believe an E-News or a TMZ or a whatever it may be, when they believe a headline instead of doing the research themselves, that's what I struggle with.
Yeah.
Because when you throw it back on someone, you're like, oh, well, did you know this, this, and this? And they're like,
no.
I had Perez Hilton on my podcast and I confronted him.
Oh, yeah, because he went off, right? Was it like shortly after they had gone to jail?
Yep.
And he kind of just was saying
like
they
these
deserved
fraudulent
it,
people deserve it, this, that, and the other. And then when he came on my podcast, I was like, well, did you know that the government illegally went into a warehouse and said all their evidence came from this? Did you know that it took the federal government 7 years to issue a formal indictment? Did you know that the state of Georgia had so much illegal misconduct that now we've settled with them for $1 million? Yeah. Like,
what did he say when you?
And he said, well, I mean, if, and he like stuttered over his words. He's like, if what you're saying is true, then yeah, like I wouldn't have pled guilty either. And I'm like, exactly.
Yeah.
Like when you know the facts, it tends to change the way you view things.
And I think people thought that this just kind of happened out of the blue. Like one year someone went to check the tax records and we're like, oh my gosh, like they didn't pay their taxes this year. Boom, we're going to prison. But this has actually been going on for a really long time. Like since what,
2012. 2012 is when the government began investigating. And so it took them 7 years to issue a formal indictment in 2019. And that was August 13th of 2019, I believe. And so that's what people don't realize is like it took, and my whole viewpoint is, if a case is so strong, it doesn't take you 7 years to build your story. Like it doesn't take the government 7 years to finally issue an indictment. And that's where it gets tough. And we were obviously on TV. We were with a network that wanted our show to be more of a comedy. And so we weren't allowed to speak about these things, which then in turn made us look like liars.
Right. Because were you aware even at that young age that this was going on?
I would say probably a year or two.
Okay.
It took.
Do you think your mom and dad thought during all that time, it will blow over, everything will be fine, this is just kind of a pain, if nothing else, that we have to maybe provide more documents or answer some more questions? For
sure. Without a doubt. I mean, they had what was supposed to be the best lawyers possible. They've spent millions and millions of dollars on. And also, you know, at the very beginning of this whole thing, my dad went to the police about his former business partner who had embezzled millions of dollars. So like he went to law enforcement first and said like, hey, this is what's happening.
When would this have been? Like
that was 2012, I believe. 2012. And because we were at my grandfather's funeral when my mom got in a call from a banker that was like, hey, you just cleared out your account. Is everything okay? And she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do this. And that's when they started uncovering what Mark Braddock, my dad's former business partner, had done. And so at that point, he went to law enforcement. And my thing is, it's like, if you're doing something illegal, you're not going to the police.
And there is like actual evidence and documented evidence of them saying what he had done.
Yes. And he actually went on the stand and said, I did all of these things. So at trial, the government gave him full immunity. So he can never be prosecuted for the crimes that he committed. And that just doesn't happen. All the lawyers that I have hired since trial, they're like, that doesn't happen. Like the government may give you some leniency, but they're not just going to completely make you immune from all the criminal misconduct. And so he got on the stand and said, I falsified documents. I signed their names to things. I was in their emails. I was like, I mean, it was wild.
Did he say he did it, or was he saying, well, they asked me to do it?
No, he said he did it, but they knew.
That they knew.
Yeah, that was always his. They did it. I did it, but they knew about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did it start becoming like real for them? Like maybe this is not going to blow over. Do you remember when that?
Oh gosh. See, I'm not sure. They did a really good job at trying to like keep us shielded from all of it. But I would say probably 2018, around that time. But then it's also so hard because, you know, at the very beginning, like my grandfather had passed away. Mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. She had gone through that whole thing. And then dad filed for bankruptcy. Like there were all these, it was just one traumatic event after the other. But I would say 2018, 2019. And it really got real when they were indicted. I mean, I will never forget one of the lawyers calling saying, hey, I just need to let you know you've formally been indicted. I need $1 million in my bank account by the close of business today if you want me to represent you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's when it really got real.
Did you ever know kind of what it actually started with? Like, was it the business partner that it actually started with?
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say yes. And then so many other parties got involved that it just got super messy.
Yeah.
I mean, and the government, that's what's so tough is people, and I grew up in the South. I grew up like you live, breathe, die, like our country, our law enforcement, like everything, like greatest nation on earth. But when you finally get to a point to where you see like United States of America versus basically like the Chrisley family, you're like, whoa, like this isn't the country I grew up believing in and being taught that like it's the greatest nation on earth, when even law enforcement doesn't abide by the laws.
Yeah. Can you share some of the things, I know there's definitely more than one, but some of the things that, I mean, you're like why you're appealing now, but some of the things that not went wrong, but were literally just not accurate during their trial that led to their conviction.
Yeah. So what's so difficult is there was a state case and there was a federal case, which a lot of people don't realize. Yeah. And so then the state ended up working with the feds, and it got really, really messy because they did things that were unethical that you really weren't allowed to do. And there was a huge Fourth Amendment violation to where the state of Georgia went in with a search warrant that was never signed off on by a judge. So it was a false search warrant that they went in and they seized a warehouse that they said all their evidence came from. And so we went to court, and a magistrate judge, which is just like a lower level judge, said none of this evidence is allowed in. Like if the government wanted a conviction, they should have done it the right way.
Yeah.
They should have followed the law, and they didn't do it. And so that judge said none of this is allowed in. And then we get to trial, and the trial judge just allowed it all in.
And they are allowed to do that. Is a lot of the time it's who you get?
It's who you get.
Yeah.
It's who you get. It is and our case was in Fulton County, Georgia, which was not good.
Why was it there?
Because they say that's where the alleged crimes were committed. Okay. And so prosecutors referred to us as the Trumps of the South, which I have written a letter to all congressmen, senators, and I say, if you want to convict them, but convict them on the truth.
Right.
And there's no need, like prosecutors knew what they were doing in a time like we're in 2022, to use the name of Donald Trump to invoke anger amongst these jurors. Like they knew exactly
which
what
really
they were
had
doing.
Nothing to do with what your parents were going through at the time.
Exactly. And so to refer to us as the Trumps of the South, I was like, we're doomed. And so it was like one thing after the other. I was like, this is not going to go well for us.
Could you feel from the beginning, like you thought from the beginning?
Well, I mean, there were times where I felt really good about it, because there was one juror who was audibly in our favor because she saw through it. Like, and you're supposed to keep a straight face while you're on the jury, whatever. But like, there were times where jurors would be like, whoa. And, that was when Mark Braddock was testifying, admitting to all of these, submitting false bank loans, forging signatures, hiding stuff, getting in their emails, all this stuff. And then like, there were people who got on the stand that said they did all of these things. And so when you had jurors who you were like, okay, they got
immunity for saying that.
Yes, they got full immunity.
Do you think that the prosecutors were just trying to find whoever they could?
Prosecutors, one of my lawyers that I've hired, he just testified in front of Congress yesterday. And he said back when he was a prosecutor, he said, he would always say, you give me the person, I'll find the crime.
Wow.
So you give me the person, I'll find the crime. And he was like, I hate to admit that.
Yeah.
He was like, but that's how prosecutors work. You give me the person, I'll find the crime. And the average person commits 3 felonies in a matter of a day.
Yeah.
Because it is what it is. And so, but if it wasn't for us being on TV, it wouldn't have been a thing.
Yeah.
Because at press conferences after trial, they said, if these reality TV stars aren't above the law, neither are you.
Well, and I was saying to you that your mom had said to me shortly before she went, she said, so many things I pointed out during the case was making references to the show and things we had on the show and things we said on the show. And she said, it was a show. And we didn't realize then, but so many of the things came back to bite us that weren't even accurate. They were things that the show had asked us to say that we did, or things that we had, like to, kind of have this more maybe, luxurious life than we were actually living. And then did they bring a lot of that back at the trial?
Oh, yeah. So they would use clips from the show.
In the courtroom?
In the courtroom.
Wow.
Yeah, they would use, and so with federal cases, like there are no cameras allowed in the courtroom, which is why people couldn't see what was happening. We did ask for cameras to be allowed in the courtroom so that people could truly see what was happening, because that's how just steadfast and like our conviction that we were was that like we want the world to see all of it. We want them to see how this trial goes down.
You've always been very open about everybody seeing everything because you're so confident in the evidence.
That's the thing. It's like I'm so confident in it that if you just go and pull the transcripts, the records, everything, you'll see where there's so many inconsistencies. And so they used clips from the show, and we were on a show. Like it was more of a scripted comedy than it was anything. And that's where it sucked, was because I would fight with producers. I'd be like, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. And then finally they just wear you down until you say it.
And then they canceled you as soon as they went.
Yes.
Immediately?
Immediately.
Like, what was that conversation? Or was it just
They really didn't even have a clear conversation. Yeah. And it was one of those things where it was tough because after 10 years of making a network, millions and millions and millions of dollars. Like it was the highest rated show on cable television at one point. And it reran on E! And Bravo, the only show to have ever done that. And so it was just like, this is interesting. This is how you operate. This is...
What was the story with the IRS lady? Or what's the story with her, like, about, was it, I don't want to say something that's not accurate, but like in terms of some of the other things that were either straight out lies or...
For the appeal.
Yeah, that's what it is, for the appeal.
The Fourth Amendment violation, which I said was illegally seizing stuff. And then you had the IRS agent who lied on the stand. And
okay, so that's what I'm that's what I'm talking about.
She lied on the stand and said that all this money was owed in taxes. And it was not owed. And she doubled down, like, it's owed. It's owed. I've checked the system. They accessed the tax records over 12,000 times. If you've accessed someone's tax records over 12,000 times, then you should know them front, back. You should know everything. And she kept saying, money's owed, money's owed. And after trial, our current CPA reached out to her and said, if you're telling me money is owed, then I need to know what is owed so I can get this taken care of. And she basically said, what I said wasn't accurate. There is no money owed. Because the IRS had over $500,000 in an account that they just never credited to my parents' socials. And we got evidence after trial that showed internal emails that showed that the prosecutors knew what they were saying was not accurate. They knew that what their IRS agent was going to testify to, what their witness was going to testify to, was not accurate. They knew it and they never corrected it.
Which is against the law.
Yes. Yeah. It was a major, and that was one of the things we said, was that there were major Brady violations against the prosecutors, which means they withheld evidence that could have proved innocence. And we asked the trial judge to give us a hearing to show these things. She wouldn't give it to us. And it's just, when you accuse the government of misconduct, they're like, how dare you?
Right. I mean, and was it scary? Like, did you ever think, whoa, what am I doing? Taking on the government?
Yeah.
Did you feel that way?
Yeah. I mean, it is scary because all it takes is for them to want you and you're done. I mean, they have unlimited resources. And people ask so many times, well, why didn't you guys take a plea deal? Why didn't you? And I will never forget at the first or second day of trial, the prosecutors came to our lawyers and said, we'll offer you a deal. And it was 15 years for dad and 5 for mom. And normally a plea deal, you're getting a deal.
Right.
You're not. And the government, they have a 98% conviction rate. That's because this is exactly what they do. They scare you into taking a deal, even if you are not guilty of what you've done. But when you take a deal, you have to say, I did what they've accused me of doing. And at that point, my mom just said, nope. She was like, we know what we've done and what we haven't done. Like, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
Like, we're not doing it. And so she made out worse by going to trial because she got 7 years, and dad made out better because he got 12.
Wow.
Yeah.
So for people who might not be up to date on it, you're currently appealing.
Yes.
Their
So we
trial.
were granted oral arguments in our appeal, which only 6% of cases get granted.
Who grants that to you?
So the appeals court.
Okay.
So the appellate court, they grant it. Ours is in the 11th Circuit. So there's a whole panel of judges and they decide what they're going to hear and what they're not going to hear. And so they granted us oral arguments and we just went for that. And now we wait. It could be a month, 6 months, a year.
Yeah.
Just whenever. You just have to sit and wait.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I know.
It's wild.
When okay, so the last time I saw your mom, she was waiting on, there was like a last minute kind of appeal almost. This was like just around Christmas.
Yep.
They were waiting on that. I think she was feeling hopeful. I think your mom always, because she's your mom,
Yeah,
Julie,
exactly.
is always like, it's always on the bright side. And you're like, oh, I don't know, this doesn't sound good, but she's still seeing the positive. And they were waiting on something to happen, which I think she thought, was hopeful. And then it didn't happen. You got to have that one last Christmas. And then they also were hoping to be able to do their sentences one after the other because of Chloe and a minor. And will you talk about that a bit? Because that actually just reminded me her saying that she had pleaded to the judge because Chloe was a minor.
Yes.
Could they do their sentences one after the other? And they were told no.
So that was really tough. And it was also very just disheartening and to see when they went for sentencing. So like trial was 4 weeks, I think, and they were found guilty. And then after that, sentencing was a few months later. So it didn't all happen at the same time. And at sentencing, the prosecutors were asking for life. That was what they were asking for. And I mean, I've got the documentation.
Has that ever been asked for a charge like that? Do you know?
Of course, these rogue prosecutors will go and ask for whatever. They can do whatever they want. And that's what people don't realize is 1973, around that time, prosecutors were granted full immunity. So prosecutors can never be charged for any misconduct. They don't think twice when they're charging someone. They don't think twice when they've got a case and they're going after someone. They'll do whatever they have to do to get that conviction. And they can there's no ramifications for them doing so. And so they asked for life. And I will never forget, like, sitting in a courtroom and you're like, oh, like when the judge says, what are you asking for? And they say life. You're just like, it like took the wind out of me.
Because you didn't know.
I was like, I've never life. You don't see rapists or murderers getting this.
No.
And that was really tough. But then they also asked for staggered sentencing because you have Chloe at home who is 11.
She was 11.
At that time she was 10.
Yeah.
And so you've got her, you've got Grayson who was 16 at the time. And also Chloe is a child that, we asked the judge first off to close the courtroom. So to make any press that was in the courtroom leave, like no one was allowed. We asked for no one to be allowed in the courtroom except for our lawyers and prosecutors.
Because you didn't want her to hear.
Because there were things that we wanted discussed about Chloe that just, it's not the public's business to be involved in a child's health care and what's in their best interest and their past trauma
for
and whatever
reasons.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just like for Chloe, that should never be a thing. And the judge said no. She refused to close the courtroom. She said that it was a very public trial, so the public deserves to know.
About a 10-year-old.
Yeah. And a lot of it pertained to Chloe's mental health and her struggles and her attachment issues with mom and all of these different things. But there were some really in-depth things that a therapist had written for the judge. And since the judge would not close the courtroom, we were like, all right, then we're not going to discuss it.
You didn't read it?
No.
Wow.
Because it just was not fair to Chloe to have that out there. And there were a lot of reasons that the judge should have staggered the sentences. But she just refused to do so. And I would never forget, she looked back in the courtroom and she said, there's a whole row of people back there that I bet would be happy to take care of these kids. And you look and you're like, wow, like this is the country I was taught to love. But yet,
Well, I remember when your mom saying that they had been at a lawyer signing over custody to you.
Yeah.
And I remember because I said, like, how is Savannah feeling? And she was like, she is strong. She can do it. But I just wish she didn't have to, because I think she thought of you still like, you still had your whole life ahead of you. And, all of a sudden this like massive risk. I mean, you were like into motherhood in a very big way.
Yeah.
The last Christmas, when they were at home and before they left, like here's the other thing. I feel like people look at celebrities and they are very easy to just dehumanize them. Right?
Oh, without a doubt.
There's someone on a screen. They're not a real person, which is why I think when someone sees a celebrity in real life, they're like, oh my gosh, it's
like
so
it's real.
Yeah, because it really is like almost just like a not real person. And I think it's probably really easy, and I'm sure I've been guilty of it before, to see someone that's popular, a celebrity, goes to prison and you hear about it, it's shocking, and then you move on with your day.
Yeah.
And you don't think about them as real people leaving real families.
Yeah.
What was those kind of last few days before they left, like in your home?
Yeah, I basically had like moved in with my parents. I mean, I still had my house, but like I was just staying there every night and spending as much time with them as possible. But it was so hard because TMZ was at their house nonstop, like noon to night. Like it was awful. Literally chase them down the interstate, like going 100 miles an hour. Like it was just a life that I'm like, what in the...
Which had really, since being in Nashville, didn't happen to you. Yeah.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you couldn't even walk out your door without someone getting a picture, you couldn't go to the grocery store, you couldn't do anything. And I was like, this is outrageous. Like I would remember like my parents would like hide in the back seat of my car, like at times, so that we could get away. Yeah. And so it wasn't any quality of life whatsoever. But then also with Christmas, I had my parents' house decorated because my mom wasn't doing any of that. And like Christmas is her favorite holiday, like ever since I was a kid. Like it was always her favorite. And she just couldn't do it, like bring herself to do any of it. So I made sure like I had it decorated. I did as much as I could, but it was hard because you realize like this is the last, this could be the last, because in my mind, all I could think of is my dad is 55 years old. Like he could die in prison. That was literally all I could think of, is like, you're not going to meet my kids. You're not going to be able to be at my wedding. You're going to miss all these big life events. And for like, is it worth it? Like for the government, that's what I say. It's like, all right, let's say they did everything that you said they did.
Which you're not saying.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, I will always fight, but for what I believe in, because I believe 110% that they're innocent and they did not do what they were accused of doing. But let's just say they did. And you say someone owes you $16 million. How? This is a non-violent offense. Why are you going to remove someone from society that was a very awesome contributing member to society? You're just going to take them away and house them in prison and cost taxpayers $60,000 a year per person, instead of allowing these people to work and pay back what you say they owe. And instead it causes so much damage. That's what people don't realize, is the damage it does to the people back home. Now, granted, it does a lot of damage to the men and women that are in prison, but also people back home. I mean, minor children, like statistics show, you're more likely to become involved in teen pregnancy, drug abuse, depression, anxiety,
if you have
suicide.
A parent in jail.
Yes. If you have a parent incarcerated, you are X amount, more likely to be involved in all these things, which is really, it's a tough pill to swallow because I'm raising 2 kids that their parents are incarcerated. So I'm trying to figure out like, all right, therapy and talking through things and trying to make sure they don't become one of those statistics. And so the whole thing was just, I mean, the night before they left was rough. Because we all just like, I mean, I say it was rough, but like we sat at the table, we played cards, we had dinner, we like sat and watched TV. We had been working, Mom and I had been like working on this puzzle, and for days. And I was like hell bent on finishing that before she left. So I did not sleep at all that night. And I like stayed up to finish it. And then that next morning I went, me, Nick, my ex-fiance, and Grayson all went to take Dad. And then Chase and my grandparents went to take my mom.
Were you there when they said goodbye to each other?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've got like pictures, and I just, like, they just stood at their bedroom and they're like, this is the last time we're going to see each other. And this is like a couple who's been together almost 30 years.
And they
who've never
really
spent a night
are
apart.
in real life.
Yeah.
Like what you see on TV is exactly how they act with each other in real life. They speak to each other the exact same way. So to think of them like saying goodbye to each other and just, not knowing.
They never spent a night apart. Like they were not this couple that were like, all right, I'm going to go on a girls trip or a guys trip.
Yeah.
That didn't happen.
Right.
Like never did it happen. And and still to this day, I mean, they have not spoken.
So they have not spoken. Okay. So you on your podcast recently, I have to tell you, I did turn it off because it was making me very sad to listen to your mom, some of the letters she's written from prison.
Yeah.
And a big section of it, she was talking about trying to email your dad. Like she was hoping the emails would go through. Do you know if they ever?
So they did, but they're so delayed that it makes it almost impossible to have a conversation because nothing makes sense. And it's not like a normal Gmail email, it's like a prison email.
Okay. So and the people are reading it too? Yeah.
And people are reading it, and they also have they have to be careful about what they put in writing because these correctional officers will take and sell stuff to tabloids. Yeah. They will. So you have been very vocal, and I feel like kind of like blown this wide open of a lot of stuff that's gone on, going on continuously in prisons about treatment of the inmates and corruption and all that kind of stuff. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I've just honestly, naively have just kind of been like, no idea. That's how I was. And that's what I say. It's like, I didn't care about it. Yeah. It's like any normal person. Like we look at our day and we're like, oh gosh, we've got a crazy day. We've got this going on, that going on. You've got so much going on in your life and you're so self-consumed that you don't really tend to look at things that don't affect you. Yeah. And I never one time thought about our prison system. I thought, oh, bad people go to prison. That's what I thought.
Which a lot of bad people do go to prison.
Yes. Yeah. But I just thought, all right, you're bad. You belong there. Yeah. But then when this happened.
So what was your first, when did you start thinking this is not what I thought?
Yeah. So
prison was going to be?
I think obviously when Mom and Dad were convicted, I started doing my research, and you start seeing that 1 in 20 criminal cases result in a wrongful conviction. You start looking at all these statistics and you're like, wow, this system is really broken. And then when Mom and Dad got there, just to hear the stories of how these men and women are spoken to and treated, and the sexual abuse that goes on, and by the guards.
By the guards.
Yeah, by the guards. And
are there male guards in female prisons?
Yes, there are male guards in female prisons and vice versa. And so that's where it gets really tricky. And also, when I start hearing these stories from Mom and Dad, I will never forget at the very beginning of Mom being there, she was trying to stand up for this younger girl, and one of the correctional officers locked Mom in the cafeteria. And she had to figure out how to get out.
How to get out.
Literally. And I'm like, what are we doing here? And you start seeing that the food is 2, 3, 4 years past the expiration date. They're consuming meat that says not for human consumption, literally on the packaging. There are maggots in the food. There is black mold, asbestos, lead-based paint. There's all these different things. And I tell people all the time, I get it. You say someone needs to go to prison, they need to serve their time. I get it. But they're human beings. And when you know better, you do better. And you start hearing these people's stories, and you hear that they endured abuse at such a young age, or they were involved, their parents were drug addicts, or a lot of people prison was really on the map.
It was in the cards.
It was in the cards for them because they were dealt such unfortunate hands. And so you look and you're like, all right. And especially as a Christian, I see so many, and this is where it really rubbed me the wrong way because I saw so many Christians against prison reform and against just anything. They're like, throw them in, throw away the key. And I read a book, and it's from a lawyer at a law firm called Wilmer Hale, which is a huge law firm like around the world. And it's like reforming criminal justice from a Christian perspective. And you start reading it and it really challenges you because at the end of the day, these are humans. These are human beings. Granted, maybe they did something wrong. There should be consequences, but it's not up for us to decide that. And it's up to us to love these people and love these people well and to help rehabilitate them.
Have your parents said anything about, like, is there any sort of rehabilitation that takes place?
None whatsoever.
For when they get out?
None.
For the other people who are getting out?
Yeah, none whatsoever. And that's why our recidivism rate is the highest of all NATO countries. And you look at it and you're like, how do we live in the greatest nation on earth, but yet we're imprisoning more people per capita? Like, it's wild. The numbers are insane. And you look at it, and right now, I mean, I'm sitting on hours upon hours upon hours of audio recordings of correctional officers that have been sent to me. And to hear the way that these correctional officers speak to these men.
Who's recording it?
It's been sent to my lawyers. Okay. And so I let them deal with it. But I've obviously listened to these recordings. And I'm just like, and I'll tell my dad sometimes. My dad's like, I mean, I know they talk to us that way, but like, I didn't, there are times where my dad's like, holy cow, I didn't know it was that bad when I tell him things that have been said. But there are, there's a residential drug and alcohol, program. And these doctors, so-called doctors that are hosting this program, it's a congressionally funded program, but they literally speak to these men like they're garbage. They tell them they're never going to be anything. They're worthless. They deserve to be here. They're criminals. And keep in mind, this is a camp. So like, you can't be in a camp if you have a violent offense.
Okay, so that's a good question. What is so they're both in a camp, quote unquote camp. Right. So which is not summer camp, though.
No, it's not. No, not summer camp.
It's not like the summer camp a lot of you probably went to.
No, it goes from like super max, medium, low, minimum.
So where they are, you cannot have committed a violent crime.
You cannot have a violent offense and be there. Okay. And you also can't have above 10 years on your sentence, but they did a variance which allowed dad to be there because once you calculate like First Step Act credits and all these different calculations, good time, then he was allowed to be there. So it's the lowest amount of security possible. But the amount of abuse and corruption that goes on is awful. I mean, and just like I said, a lawyer of mine testified in front of Congress just a day or two ago, and it was about a lot of criminal justice reform in these prisons and how, a lot of prisons still charge 75 cents a minute. And to even just communicate with loved ones is almost impossible for some people. And unfortunately, women take the brunt of it. Like, studies show that women are the ones...
The female prisoners?
No. So female prisoners, it's terrible. The amount of sexual abuse is awful. But financially and psychologically and all these things, the women on the outside are the ones that have to pick up the pieces. So whether it's mothers, daughters, wives, they have to be the ones to financially support the loved ones in prison. So it makes it even harder on us women on the outside because we have to do it all. We have to raise families. We have to send money in. We have to do all these different things. And that's why I've made it such it's part of my mission to bring change to our system because I want to help rehabilitate people. Like, as a Christian, I can't sit and say, throw this person away in prison for 30 years and also say I believe in redemption. Like, it doesn't go hand in hand.
So what would you say, because I've seen it on your comments and I'm sure there's going to be someone that listens.
Oh yeah.
That says they did the crime. They did the crime. Why should I care what they eat? I mean, there will be people who will say that. I'm sure there's people who have said it to you.
All the time. People say, like,
and what should they think about instead? If someone's thinking that, how do you flip that switch in your head, flip the narrative?
Yeah, I think, when someone's already gotten to that point, it's pretty hard to change their mind if they believe they're guilty or they're not guilty. But I tell people all the time, I'm like, go and pull the transcripts. Just go read them and see. But also, what if this was your loved one? Yeah. Like I tell people all the time, you're one bad police officer, one bad judge, one bad prosecutor away from this being you.
Yeah.
Just like a lawyer of mine said, when he was a prosecutor, you show me the person, I'll find the crime. Like, that's how these prosecutors work. So I try to tell people all the time, like, what if this was your mother? What if this was your daughter? What if you wouldn't want this for them. Yeah. You would want basic, bare necessities for them. I'm not asking for them to be at the Four Seasons, but I'm asking for proper health care. I'm asking for, proper food. I mean, these men and women in prison literally starve. Like, my mom said they will be, first off, the food is terrible, but these women will want more than just the one little plate of food that they're given. And there will be more food there for them to get. And these correctional officers will take the food and make the women watch him as he pours it into the garbage and pours grease and salt and everything on top of it so they can't go and get it out of the garbage and eat.
Wow.
Yeah.
So on the outside, are you ever able to bring that up or bring that to anybody in authority's attention?
So I have. I've upset a lot of people.
Yeah.
The Bureau of Prisons is not a fan of me, which I'm fine with. They have come out discrediting everything that I have said, saying that I'm lying. And I would not say anything that I'm saying if I didn't have the proof to back it up. If I didn't have
every time you say something, you always have
I have the proof.
Evidence.
I have the evidence. I have the proof. I have photos. I have correctional officers who are really good. And that's what I will say is not all of them are bad.
Yeah.
There are some really good ones who want change. But when you have people that are high up that aren't implementing change, it's almost impossible. So at this point, I have kind of gone past the BOP and I'm now working with the Office of Inspector General to actually do a full investigation into the prison system and all of the allegations that I've put out here.
Yeah. Would you ever get your law degree? Have you ever thought about it? I mean, I actually feel like you have an honorary one at this point, but would you ever make it official?
I'll take an honorary one.
I just don't know you can actually practice with an honorary one. You might need something on paper.
Yeah, right? No, I spoke at CPAC this past year, it was in D.C., and it was a more conservative, event with politicians. And someone said to me, because we were discussing things, they were like, you need to do this. He was like, first off, you know it firsthand. You have seen it. He was like, and you know more than any person who is not a lawyer should know.
Well,
he was like, you need to do this. You would be really good at it. So I told Grayson, the 17-year-old, I was like, if mom comes home, I will go back to college with you.
Really?
Yeah. So I told him, I was like, mom comes home, I'll go back to college with you.
If your parents were released tomorrow, would you still fight for prison reform?
Oh, without a doubt.
You would.
That's what people say all the time. You didn't care about this before.
But you also didn't know about it.
Thank you. That's what I say. I'm like, why do people become doctors, lawyers, whatever it may be? It's because something happened to someone they loved. So without a doubt.
Has any of what you've been doing challenging the system come back negatively at your parents in prison?
Yeah.
Okay.
They've definitely had some retaliation for it, which it's fine. It's not fine, but
they're still supportive of you doing this. Yeah.
They have said, like, there are people who are in their 70s and 80s sitting in prison for a nonviolent crime that are going to die there, that are going to die in prison by themselves. And my parents were like, you've got to fight for these people. Like there is a man that's there with my dad, and he is the sweetest human being in the world. And he's in his 70s. He's a black man, and he's awesome. He is like happy-go-lucky. He's been in prison for 10 years now, 15 years, somewhere around there. And but always has a good spirit. Always. And he shouldn't be there. I wholeheartedly believe that he did not do what he was accused of doing. And he was a police officer in New Orleans and was accused of, you know, this man who had died. They said that this officer did it. And when in reality, there was a riot that broke out. The guy fell, ruptured his spleen because he was a drug addict, and his spleen was 5 times the size of what it should have been. So it was not like this officer murdered this man, you know.
But he doesn't have anyone fighting for him.
He doesn't have anyone fighting for him. And I have all the documentation to show that, like, literally everything, and even the police force in Louisiana has stood behind this guy and continues to put money on his commissary account so that he can eat in prison. Like, there are so many individuals that it's like they don't have people fighting for them, or their families may not have the means to do so. And so my parents were like, it's fine if we have to suffer for a little while, if it means that lasting change is brought, because it's awful. I mean, I can't even imagine. I think to myself all the time, especially with mom, because, you know, men can fight their way out of things sometimes. Like, they can just, but as a woman, it's hard when you have these men who are in a place of power over you. And, you know, there was a prison in Dublin, California that there were hundreds of women that were sexually abused by the guards, the warden, the chaplain, all at this facility. And it was so bad that a judge ordered that the place be closed down. And so it's like, I think of that and I'm like, that could be my mom. Like, I can't allow her to become one of those women.
Do you notice a difference every time you go in them? Like, have they been able to keep their spirits? Do you notice like an emotional decline?
Yeah, I mean, it gets hard.
Because you go a lot.
Yeah, so last year we went every weekend except for maybe 4 weekends.
You just alternated?
Yeah. Every weekend except for 4 weekends. And it's hard, especially around holidays or, you know, coming up is Grayson's 18th birthday, his high school graduation, his, like, all the really big moments that they should be here for, that they're just not, which it's really, you know, and my mom, like,
she is the celebrator of all celebrators.
Like, she celebrates everything. She never missed anything, like nothing. So that's when it gets really difficult.
Do you, when you visit with them, do you talk about the future, or is it too hard?
We do. Dad does. I would say Dad does a better job at dreaming than Mom. Mom is kind of just like, this is my life. And Dad's like, no. Like, this is not going to be our life. Like, we're not letting the government take. He's like, I'm not letting the government take my ability to dream and want better and to get out of here. He's like, I'm not doing it. And so we talk a lot about, like, all right, well, when you get out of here, like, and I'm at the point where, all right, the appeal doesn't work. I have option B, C, D, E. Like, I have multiple ways to get them home other than just the appeal.
So currently you are waiting on an appeal that you just recently did. And the appeal is for a new trial.
Yes.
But they would then get out while awaiting the new trial.
Yes.
And the whole basis of the appeal is that what was presented at their original trial was false.
Yes. Like, what was presented was false. There was government misconduct there, you know, and too, just not sufficient evidence as well for like, especially too, what people don't realize is, like, Mom gets charged with 7 counts of bank fraud. Her name wasn't on a single bank loan. Like, there was nothing to tie her to it other than being married to my dad. And then the government never one time submitted any bank loans. All they did was show an Excel spreadsheet that they created. So they never showed one loan document.
Which I think, so you're saying this as her daughter and as the fact girl. And people online are just seeing that Julie walked into a bank and she signed a form and she knew what she was doing. And they go, well, then she did it. But they never think, but maybe that is actually entirely false.
Exactly. That was the thing, was like, there wasn't her name wasn't on a single loan. Not on a single loan. And that's what's so hard, is people don't realize those things. And something to really think about too is, you know, you have these prosecutors who will charge people. Never do you see someone charged with just one count of something. And they were charged with 2, 3, 4, 10, 12 counts. And so as a juror, these jurors are sitting there and they're like, whoa, they were charged with 12 different counts. They have to be guilty of at least one of them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
And so that's why, like, there has to be change when it comes to all these different laws and protocols, and prosecutors should be held to a much higher standard of conduct. And there should be, you shouldn't be able to just tack on all these charges.
Yeah.
And they do that because, like I said, jurors are like,
Right.
oh gosh, they have to be guilty of at least one.
Well, and I heard you say something about in the appeal, or I don't know if it was at the appeal, that when the jurors were polled after the original trial, that they were asked if they had known at the time what the prosecutors were saying, so much of it was false, would they have voted the same way?
So after trial, our investigators interviewed as many jurors that would allow them to interview them. And part of their questioning was, if you would have known that what this IRS agent said was false, would it have changed the outcome of the trial? And they said yes. Because what had happened was the government used the tax fraud case to build the bank fraud case. So the government used tax fraud to portray this image of these greedy, money-hungry people and that didn't want to pay their taxes.
Right.
And so they were able to create this image in the first week of trial. And then they went into the bank fraud because their bank fraud was the more like, you know, they thought that was their iffier charges. And so they were able, that was the thing, was if it, I mean, you have jurors who said if we knew she was lying, we wouldn't have found them guilty.
Because as a juror, when you're listening to a witness, you believe they're telling the truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, it has been a year and a half, just about a year and a half, and your life has literally blown up in that you went from being this like young, I mean, you're still young, but young.
And the only reason I keep my phone like on, I have a select few of people that like try to call me, and I'm like, I just look for the kids. I'm like, I like look for the kids because I'm like,
but also I said to you earlier, I'm like waiting on this appeal. Are you just like waiting by your phone? Because would it be a matter of just your lawyer calling and saying, we have an answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. What if it happened on the podcast?
Yeah. What if that be something?
I mean, what a podcast that would be.
It would either be really good or really bad.
Really, I'd be like, oh gosh, cut, or keep rolling. Okay. So in this year and a half, you went from being single, living your life, doing your thing, to a full-time mom of a 10-year-old and a...
Well, so now they're 11 and 17.
11 and 17.
Yes.
Okay. And just like, boom. So they moved
overnight.
in with you, into your house.
Yes.
You were like making lunches, driving to school, doing all that kind of stuff. Still
getting
trying
to therapy. Getting
to therapy.
Chloe
were you dating at the time it happened?
So Nick and I, we had already called off everything. He went with me to drop my dad off. And then probably end of that January of 2022, we were like, all right, we like just don't need to talk anymore.
Right.
And then, so I really, like I was dating people here and there, like, nothing serious. And then I realized that like, okay, I was dating someone that did not have kids, and he was a great person, but for people that don't have kids or maybe haven't been around kids a lot, they don't realize like, the work that it takes between school and therapy and tutoring and extracurricular activities and doctor's appointments, all the things. Like they just don't realize it. So I was like, all right, this is not going to work. And then finally I was like, all right, now it's a lot easier dating someone that has kids because you just realize that like, hey, they come first.
Yeah.
And then, like, it's us.
Yeah.
Which is...
So Savannah is dating now. I asked her if we could talk about it. She said we could. She was like, I mean, it's out there. It's out there. We were having a good laugh over it. So where does he live again?
Thomasville, Georgia.
Thomasville, Georgia. Yeah. That's right. I know. I asked her if he would move to Nashville.
Yes.
I think he's going to ever move to Nashville. He has 3 small kids.
Yes.
So he definitely understands... what
it takes.
Yeah. And he's met your mom. He's gone with you to meet your mom.
Yes.
What was her reaction?
Oh, she loved him.
Yeah.
She loved him.
I can't imagine Julie honestly not loving anybody, but really she didn't like some. When it
came to dating, she was tougher than my dad.
Oh, really?
She was tougher than my dad, and she would always see right through people.
Okay.
And like there have been times where it's like, should have listened to her.
I should have
listened to her because she just knows.
Yeah.
But she was like, you guys look so cute together. Like, you just look perfect together.
Yeah.
She loves him.
Well, and he's older, which I think is good 38. For you. Yeah.
Yeah. He's
how old
38.
Are you?
I'm 20. I'll be 27 in August.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. So and it's like, you start to see things and you're like, all right, certain things, it's like just weird how they happen. But his birthday is August 4th. Mine is 7 days later on August 11th. And then we met 7 days later on August 18th. Wow. Yeah. So it's
August is your month.
Yeah. August is like just our month.
Yeah.
I'm just going to celebrate all month long.
You slid into his DMs. It was very like new age of you. You just were like, I think too, you're probably at a point in your life where you're like, I don't have time to waste.
Yeah.
So if I see something and I want it, I mean, why not? I'll just put it out there.
I'm very much that way.
Yeah.
But also so Robert is his name. He was in the public eye for like not anything, just his marriage and all kinds of things that had just gone really wrong.
People can just Google that if they want to.
They can just Google it.
We don't have to talk about it.
No, we don't have to. No.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, right? You can Google it. And so I just honestly felt bad for him because I was like, I know what it feels like to be in the public eye for something that you don't want to be in the public eye for. I was like, so if you need anything, like I'm here, feel free to reach out. And he also knew, like we knew some of the same people. It was weird once we started like actually talking. We were like, whoa, like whatever. And so then we just started messaging back and forth a little bit, and he met me in Boston for the Morgan Wallen concert, and like it was just from that point forward, it was
instant.
And it was instant. And we met, and before we had even gone to the concert, because like he had friends there, I had Grayson there, and so we had met up and we were talking, and I was like, yeah, I got to go out to LA to film this other show. He was like, I've got to go to LA too to meet with this PR person to help me deal with everything that's going on. He was like, when are you going? I told him. He was like, all right, I'll change my trip to then. I'm like, you just met me in person like an hour ago and you're already changing your trip to like meet me in LA?
It's meant to be.
Yeah. He's awesome.
Oh, okay. I love that. Maybe I will get to meet him one day. Okay, so
maybe at Morgan Wallen tomorrow.
Yeah, maybe. I still told you I can't find my ticket, so I don't know where I'm sitting. You're like, where are you sitting? I'm like, at this point, I'm not sitting anywhere. I'll wave to you if I see you, hopefully, or I might be getting arrested myself when I break the Morgan Wallen. And then I'll need your help, your doctorate lawyer.
Yeah, I can help you there.
Lawyer. Yeah,
I will help you there.
You can help me. In this, like you again, like when I see you now, when I talk to you on social media, I know that you are a very strong person, but everybody, no matter, and I think I said this to you at the beginning when I originally texted you once, and like everybody has their breaking point, right? Like you can only hold so much. Do you feel like you've now met because I'm sure you're probably trying to keep it together for Grayson.
Oh yeah.
For Nanny, for Chloe. Do you feel like you have met somebody that you can kind of lean on?
Oh, without a doubt.
Okay.
Without a doubt. It's great because, like I said, he has his kids. Yeah. I have mine, I guess. What you call them.
No, they're your kids.
Yeah, right? It's like he has his, I have mine. They're like his kids are his priority. His kids are my priority. My kids are my priority. Mine are his priority.
Yeah.
Like, and we're so much on the same page about that. But we also, it's like, I will say, the moment I like knew, all right, this may be the person, was when my ex-fiance Nick died in the motorcycle accident in September. And I was visiting my dad when I found out. And so I was able to tell Dad like before he found out through anyone else. And
were they close?
They were best friends. Like at times, like that was like me and Dad's biggest riff was like, you're choosing him over me type thing. So they were like best friends. They went to lunch almost every single day before Dad left for months.
And he went with you when you
and he went with me to take Dad. And so when Nick died, I was like, I don't know what to do. Like I was on the plane when I found out, landing in Florida to go see Dad. I was like, I need to get home. And then there was like, I just couldn't. Yeah. There was no way. And then I was like, all right, I need to tell Dad. So I went to tell Dad, and where Dad's at's like 3.5 hours from Robert. And Robert had gotten his kids to his mom and was like, Mom, like just please watch them for just the day. And he flew to Pensacola, and he was like, you don't have to talk to me. You owe me nothing. He was like, I just want to help get you home. And I'm here if you need me. I'm here if you don't need me. Like, whatever you need is fine. And so he went with me and he flew us back home. We got home and he drove me to where the accident happened because I wanted to go. And like, I was like, I need to see. And we get there and he just stood. He was like, go do, like, you do your thing. He stood at the car. And obviously I'm like all to pieces.
Yeah.
Like two of my best friends were there, met me there.
Because you were ex-fiancés, but you were still close.
We were still like 5 years with someone. Like it just, you can't erase that.
Yeah.
And at the very end, before we left, Robert came over to me and hugged me and he said, do you mind if I say a prayer for Nick and his family? And like stood at the stop sign. The accident happened in between two churches and stood at the stop sign and said like just the most amazing prayer. And he then, weeks had passed. I struggled for a really long time with it. And I finally was just like, you know what? I'm really sorry. Like I know you don't want to hear about this all the time.
Yeah.
It just like, you don't want to hear about my
You don't want to hear about
ex-fiancé.
my trauma.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like you don't want to hear about it all the time. And his exact words to me were, don't you ever apologize for how you feel. I wasn't your first love. You weren't mine, but we could be each other's last. Like that was his exact words.
That's
and
like
I was
a Hallmark
like,
card.
Literally. And I was like, all right, this is like what a real man, like this is how he acts to your trauma and to life experiences, and like just someone who takes the load off and makes it lighter. And it just, that's when I was like, all right, you may be the one.
You may be the one. Do you feel like if your parents are released, say next month, do you feel like you are going to have a day where you just let this all out, like everything you have just been carrying? Like, do you feel like you're just holding on?
Without
like, are you
a doubt.
aware that you're holding on to it until that happens?
Without a doubt. Yeah. But I'm like high functioning depression. Like my therapist, that's what she says. She's
I didn't
like,
know that was a term.
Yes. And she like, she saw it, like
depression.
you really like look into it. It's wild.
Okay.
Like she said during COVID, like her clients are like doctors, lawyers, like very high functioning people who are suffering from depression. But how I just go. Like I turn my sadness, whatever it may be, into just like, all right, I'm like a worker bee. So like I do whatever I need to do to get mom and dad out. I do. And then there are times where I'm sitting there by myself at night. Like I just run myself until I'm like exhausted to where I don't have to lay in bed at night and like think. Yeah. And so I do think like when mom and dad come home, I've told them like, I'm taking all my stuff. I'm just going to rent an apartment downtown and I am just going to sit like, I'm going to need like a month to just truly decompress.
You're
going
to need to do that
everything.
EMDR. That's what you're going to need to do. Or those like the
I'm all for it.
Microdosing. Yes.
I know. I want to go do like the ayahuasca.
Yeah.
I want to go to one of those like so bad.
So there's a place here in town. I was just telling all the guys about this yesterday because I know someone who's doing it. It is like all the things you're thinking, but it's with a lozenge. I might have them on the podcast. We're seeing how our experience goes. You go 3 times and it's a lozenge.
What?
Yes. And it's the same thing like with this that you're talking about, this like the purging and all of that. But there's a guy that does it in town.
Are you going to do it?
No, I'm not doing it. My friends
you need to do it to speak from experience.
Oh my, I don't know. I might not come back from it. But I think when you go, you're supposed to go with something specific. I believe it's like a specific trauma release.
God, how do you pick which one?
My luck, I feel like I'd probably like come out with all this trauma that I'd been burying my whole life. And then I need therapy for all these like new problems I never knew I had. Yeah. But you don't need to go to like Mexico. You can do it in town. I'll get you the information.
All right, I want the information.
Yeah, you take a loss. Well, okay, so a friend of mine at this point, she will have done it 2 times. So I'm going to actually ask her how it's going.
Okay, yeah.
The first time she said was very hard. Like the after.
Yeah.
I think you go through a lot of emotions.
Because you unpack, and stuff comes out that you're like, all right, I know I'm hurt, but I don't know why I'm hurt. Yeah. And then like your brain just remembers it through all. I'm a little nervous.
Okay.
But I want to do it.
You, how are you finding people who you feel kind of just keep coming at you in the press. Like, how are you personally, like not on social media, but how are you personally coping with like the TV show being canceled, maybe business partners, brand deals, family members, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Like,
I honestly,
mentally.
I'm pretty tough. Like, I'm doing okay.
You truly are.
I truly am.
Okay.
Like, there are times where it really sucks and it hurts, but then like people restore my faith in humanity.
Okay.
Like, even with my real estate stuff, like I started up doing real estate in Nashville, and this guy in town, he was like, "Hey, Savannah, I've got these 7 houses I want you to list." And I'm like, did not have to do that. He's putting $7 million in my hands to sell. And I'm like, didn't have to do that, but he did it because he knew, like, I'm raising 2 kids and I'm doing whatever I can to provide, whether it's podcasts, social media, real estate. So it's like people like that come along. You're like, all right, I could focus on all these negative people and the things they're saying, or I could be really grateful for the people who are like believing in me and showing up and giving me opportunities and allowing me to support 2 kids. So that's kind of how I look at it, is like, for a long time, I focused on all the negative, but now I'm like, you know what? Let me focus on all the really good people that show up. Yeah. And then the negative people, just allow that to be fuel for me to hopefully implement change.
Okay. What is the best way someone can support what you're doing?
I think just listening to my podcast, which is Unlocked with Savannah, following me on social media. And this year's going to be really big. A lawyer of mine, he and I, our goal is to testify in front of Congress. So that's kind of where we're going next.
About the wrongdoings that happened.
Yeah, about not even my parents.
Oh, not your parents.
Not my parents, just the prison system as a whole.
The prison system.
And how there needs to be rehabilitation involved, and how the government should be held accountable for their misconduct, and just trying to make it a healthier, safer environment for everyone. And that's our goal. So I think just like supporting the projects, that's what, like as influencers, like people following you on social media or listening to your podcast, like that helps so much.
Yeah. Well, I hope that the next time I see you, your mom is in the room.
I know.
That's what
me too. That is my goal.
Because it's still, I mean, I know for me it doesn't seem real. So I know for you it definitely doesn't seem real that this is your life sometimes. But you are just doing amazing things. And I know they were proud of you before. And I know that they are probably just so proud of you right now. So
thank you.
So happy.
Thank you for having me.
Today. Thank you for being here.